Lion in the Wind, Chapter 16. Black stood in his command center and studied the main display screen. "I see that the war is still going in favor of the Gorg," he muttered. He then turned to Elgar and asked, "How soon before Tegani and the other lions can get out into the field?" "I don't know. The doctor is having issues getting the new prototypes working," said Elgar. Black swore. "What's wrong? Is something defective?" Elgar shrugged. "I don't know. All I've been told is that he's unable to get them to work." Black swore again. "That man is the greatest cybernetics genius in history, and you're telling me he's suddenly hit a brick wall and can't continue?" Elgar again shrugged. "More or less." Black briefly clenched his fists in exasperation before forcing himself to relax. Anger was not his friend right now. So he needed to stay calm. Of all the times to have a brain fart. Well, he did it once, so he can do it again. In the meantime, we've got bigger issues to deal with. How did our raid on the Gorg High Command go? Elgar flipped through several pages of charts, stopping at one of interest. The effects on the front lines was minimal. But it did greatly upset their command structure. However, given the large number of eligible replacements in the lower ranks, it won't take them long to replace the commanders we killed, said Elgar. Black swore louder and punched the wall, causing part of it to crack. He then pulled his hand back and examined it. The impact had torn away part of the false skin that covered his now scuffed, but otherwise undamaged cybernetic prosthetic. He grunted in frustration. If he kept punching walls like this, he'd need to get his arm replaced, again. He soon turned and glared at Elgar. "Well then, we'll just do it again, and again, and again until they run out of replacements," he screamed angrily. "Using our agents too many times risks exposing them, and potentially dragging the citizens into the war in favor of the Gorg," said Elgar flatly. Black sighed. "Fine, fine. Halt the attacks if you want to. But in the meantime we'll need to come up with other solutions. Especially if Bergen can't produce another working lion." "I'll look around and see what I can find," said Elgar. "Good. Please do. And, speaking of the good doctor, what's the status of our efforts to move that lab up here?" Elgar frowned, but said nothing. Black groaned and slapped his forehead in frustration. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. "We're doing the best we can, sir, but we're running into a rather stubborn bureaucracy." "I don't care how stubborn it is. Start killing people if you have to until you get some results. That lab needs to be moved, now. There's no telling when the Gorg might attack them again, and I've got too much invested in that place to risk losing it all." Elgar bowed slightly, and said, "I'll do my best, but I can't guarantee anything at this time." He then turned and slipped out of the room. Black turned back towards the large display screen on the far wall and pondered his situation. "He better make something happen or heads are going to roll," he muttered. After a bit, he grunted angrily, turned and stormed out of the room. Delgra looked up from his desk as Odivian walked in. "Ah, welcome back. I take it your mission was a success," he asked. Odivian nodded. "It went off sweet as candy. However, it would seem that my departure was a bit premature." "How so?" "Well, I heard you had a little bit of excitement while I was gone. Apparently that lieutenant I brought with me turned out to be a slagbaskag." "Yes, well, that's behind us." "Behind us? Good heavens, sir. I almost got all of you killed because I didn't do my job right. Heck, you got a bullet in your arm because of me." Delgra shrugged dismissively. It happens. He even fooled me, so don't be too hard on yourself. I mean, if his paperwork was spotless, and he successfully fooled both of us, then he was definitely a top-notch spy. Too bad he wasn't on our side. We could have really used someone like him. Even so, I still feel bad. I could have prevented all of this from ever happening if I'd done my homework a little better." Delgra picked up a folder off his desk and tossed it to Odivian. "Don't be too hard on yourself. Even Centel couldn't find a speck of dirt on this guy. His record is immaculate, which means he was either that good, or he had inside help. Odivian studied the file briefly and then looked back at Delgra. Do you want me to go out and see if I can find out who helped him? You don't need to. Centel already has that covered. If there's a spy up there, they want to root him out just as much as we do. So I trust they'll sort that out for us. In the meantime, I've got some other work for you. Most of it involves acquiring supplies that we badly need which nobody seems interested in giving us. Odivian laughed. Ah, thievery by computer. I'm sure I can do that. Delgra smirked. Not thievery. I just need people to let me have what I need to run my facility. Ah, then creative arm twisting. Yeah, I can do that too, grinned Odivian. Delgra chuckled. All right, we'll stick with creative arm twisting then. But either way, see what you can do. I need the stuff by the middle of next week. Sure thing. Just give me a list of what you need, and I'll make it happen. Bergen sat on a hillside outside his laboratory and stared up at the stars, an expression of frustration etched deeply across his face. What am I doing differently than before? I know I did something to make him sentient. But what? Come on, Edias, think. You did it once, so you can do it again, he said to himself. A meteorite streaked across the sky just above him in a brilliant flash of light. 3 master's degrees, a doctorate, 12 national awards in robotics, and even the government award for excellence in science, and yet I can't seem to repeat the success I had with Tegani. Why is that? What's different this time? He sighed at this. Just then a thought came to his mind about his mother. He remembered all the lessons she'd taught him growing up, and the many pearls of wisdom she'd shared. Then her words about Mashwa came to his mind. Whenever you find yourself in great need, and have nowhere else to turn, call on him. He can help you, she'd told him. He considered these words, and thought about doing just that, but then shook it off. No, that's crazy. I'm a man of science. That stuff is for young children, he thought. His mind then wandered off in search of other solutions, but soon returned again to what his mother had once told him. He shrugged. But what else is there to do? I've done everything else I can think of. So it can't hurt to at least give it a try, he thought. He then straightened himself, and tried to make his posture more professional. Or, at the very least, more respectful. He then opened his mouth, paused, and soon closed it. He felt silly. But for some reason he knew that he needed to do this. So he took a deep breath, and said, Mashwa, I don't know if you can hear me, or if you're even real, but I'm, well, asking for help. My mom believed in you a lot, but I don't. I'm a man of science. Things like you just don't exist. He paused briefly, and then continued, waving his hands dismissively. I'm not saying that you're not real, but, well, you know, His voice trailed off. Oh, why am I doing this, he thought to himself. He gathered himself together one more time, and said, Mashwa, if you're real, show me what I need to do to make my lions work. Silence. Despite this, he continued to listen intently for any whisper of an answer. But only the gentle sounds of the night greeted him. He put his face into his hands and sighed. Yeah, that's what I thought, he said in defeat. He soon stood up, made his way into his laboratory, and then over to his office. But, just as he reached for the door handle, he heard a shuffling sound behind him. He stopped and turned slightly, straining to hear what had caused it. However, he could hear nothing else. Tegani, is that you? He asked. More shuffling. Who's there? Still more shuffling. Bergen was beginning to get nervous. He cautiously reached over and flipped on a light switch. As the lights flickered on, what appeared before him left him stunned. Not 2 feet away from him stood his 5 new lions, each of which stared up at him with deep, sparkling eyes that seemed to glow in the fluorescent light of the room. Bergen looked at them for a few seconds, and then smirked. All right guys, very funny. You can come out now, he said. One of the lions perked up in curiosity. There is no one else here. It is just us, he said. Bergen studied the lion intently, and then realized that there was no sign of any control devices directing their movements. They were clearly acting on their own. He blinked in amazement. "You're... really... you're... active," he exclaimed in surprise. The lions nodded in unison. Bergen was puzzled. He paced back and forth for several moments trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Finally he grabbed a nearby programming station and wheeled it in front of one of the lions. "Can I have a look inside your mind?" he asked. The lion nodded, took an interface cable from Bergen, and plugged it into a port on his chest. Bergen then pulled up a chair and sat down in front of the station. With the skill and grace of a master pianist, his hands flew across the keyboard, issuing one command after another as though conducting a digital symphony. And, as he dug deep into their code, he was amazed at what he saw. He even saw patterns in the lion's mind that were similar to the ones he'd seen in Tegani's. He then continued his work all through the night, and well into the next morning, trying his best to determine what had triggered their sentience. If he wanted any hope of repeating his now 2 times of success, he needed to figure out what he'd done to make them work, and quickly. Persia stared curiously at the 5 lions as they stood in a row in front of her. "So they're active?" she asked. Bergen nodded. "Yes they are, and it's the oddest thing really. I went outside last night to relax and let my brain cool off in hopes of maybe finding a solution to why they wouldn't boot their AIs. And when I came back in, I found this," he said, gesturing to the 5 lions. "I'm hoping I can eventually figure out what I did so I can continue to recreate my success." "Have you thought of names for them?" asked Persia. "I have. But I'm not sure they'll like them." Persia chuckled. "As long as you don't call them mud, dirt, and sinkhole, they shouldn't care." Bergen smiled. "Well, let's tell them their names and see if they like them." "No, actually, why don't you pick names for them for a change?" "Me," said Persia in surprise. Bergen nodded. "They'll likely call you Mom just like Tegani did, so I think it's only fair that you name them yourself this time like a mother should." Persia thought about this for a moment. "Are any of them, girls?" asked Persia. "Actually, yes. They're the ones without manes." Persia studied the lions. 3 females and only 2 males, she asked curiously. "Tegani makes the 3rd male." "Oh," replied Persia. Tegani raised an eyebrow in interest. "Are their personalities reflective of their genders?" he asked. Bergen nodded. "Yes they are, surprisingly enough." "So why did you make girls?" asked Persia. "I wanted to balance the sexes to give each of them an equal, yet opposite partner to help them whenever they needed it. I mean, it works in nature, so I figured it'd work here too," said Bergen. "Dad? Not to sound silly, but why do they even have genders?" "They don't need to, well, said Persia sheepishly. Bergen chuckled lightly. "It's not for anything like that. The bestowing of gender is mostly for the convenience of those interacting with them. We deal with gender in every living thing we encounter, so it's only natural for us to assign gender to things that don't have it in order to aid us in our interactions with them. So, while the lions have no need of gender, it's a necessity for us. At least, in the social sense. So, all that remains now is for you to give them a gender-appropriate name. So choose whatever you want." "Just be sure I can spell it," said Bergen. Persia grinned at this, and then studied the 5 lions for several moments. "All right, I've got it. To you 2 boys I give the names, Sabo and Renk. To the 3 girls I give the names Nakasa, Pasa and Yetika respectively." The lions each nodded as they received their respective names. "It is a pleasure to meet all of you," said Tegani. "As will you," said Renk. Tegani then turned to Bergen, and said, "May I take them outside for a while? I'd like to talk with them in private." "Why?" said Bergen, furrowing his brow in curiosity. "I have many things to teach them." "All right, that's fair. And besides, I need to take Persia to the vet today anyways." "Aw, Dad, do we have to?" "I hate going to the vet," whined Persia. "It's for your biannual checkup. Besides, it's good for you, said Bergen. Yeah, but his hands are cold, and he always sticks those instruments of his into weird places. It's embarrassing. And besides, I'm healthy. Why do I need to see a vet? Failure to see a doctor could result in some unknown disease taking hold of your body, and then you would be thrust into situations that are far more embarrassing than any doctor's visit. That is why you really should go, said Tegani. Persia rolled her eyes at this. Gee, thanks for sticking up for me, she muttered. Avandros strolled casually up the mountainside and stopped in front of Nagago. Greetings, Lord Nagago. We bring news, said the Vandros in a raspy, sandpapered voice. What is your report? Asked Nagago. The war goes well. Many of your enemy's people have been slain, said the Vandros. And what of the proxy? There has been no sign of him since the first day, said the Vandros. A soft growl emanated from under Nagago's hood. I need to know for certain if he is dead. I cannot risk his continued involvement in this war, he said. He has been gone for many weeks, my lord, and no trace of him has been found. Thus it is only reasonable to assume that he is already dead. Nagago growled again. I want proof, not theories. Either bring me his body, or keep searching until you find it. The Vandros bowed slightly. We will try, master. But it will not be easy. This war is not like the old days. These are not swords and arrows that we fight against. These men carry fire sticks that kill without touching. They can slay our kind at great distances and take no reservations in doing so, growled the Vandros. Nagago grumbled angrily. Then do whatever you can to verify his death. If he is not dead, then hunt him down and kill him. The proxy cannot be allowed to live. If he does, he could destroy my plans. The Vandros bowed again. As you wish, my lord. The Vandros then turned and raced away into the prairie. As Nagago watched him go, he grumbled angrily. You will not win this time, Mashwa. You will not win. Odivian walked into Delgra's office, and said, What's up? You wanted me? Delgra looked up from his desk, and then pushed a data disk across to him. Odivian picked it up and studied it curiously. What's this? Your newest orders. Sintel just got word from our old friend Oik. He's apparently working over the Gorg from behind the lines, and would like one of us to come stay with him. Apparently he needs a Yigsan advisor to help him figure out where he can do the most damage. Oddly, Sintel thinks you're the best man for that job. So they want you to head over, team up with him, and see what kind of help you can be. Odivian grinned. Really? Well, I feel honored. Delgra grinned. I figured you'd like the mission. What? Are you kidding? I've been sitting on my thumbs for the past couple weeks. Of course I'd love a mission like this. It sure beats siding around all day surfing the web. Delgra laughed. Well, then get your butt out there. Oik knows you're coming. So all you need to do is get over to Sadison territory and he'll brief you on the rest from there. Odivian smiled, and said, Roger that, sir. Tegani sat quietly on the ground and studied the 6 squads of men that stood before him. What do you think of the new unit? Asked Welk. They've trained well. But they still lack one thing, said Tegani. What would that be? Tegani looked to his right and nodded towards 5 forms hidden in the shadows of a nearby building. Slowly, one by one, they slipped out into the sunlight, trotted over to him and sat down. Welk looked curiously at Tegani. Ah, you mean them. Do you think my guys are ready for their lions? There's no better time than now, said Tegani. He then turned to the soldiers in front of him, and said, Gentlemen, these are my new brothers and sisters. I know you have great respect for what I am, and what I can do. So I ask that you provide each of them with the same level of respect that you have given me. He then introduced each of the lions and announced which squad they would be assigned to. Lastly he assigned himself to 4th Squad. Pentel found this odd. Why did you assign him to 4th Squad? He asked. Actually, he assigned himself, said Welk. What? Said Pentel in surprise. Yeah, I let him pick the assignments based on which of his siblings he felt would work best with each squad. He knows them better than any of us do, so I figured it was best that way. Pentel looked at each of the squads and then back at Welk. You do realize that Sergeant Sims is in charge of 4th Squad, right? Yeah, I know that. So why let him assign himself to that squad? He likely picked them because he's comfortable working with Sims, and I personally think they're a good match. Alright, but I don't want any claims of favoritism out of the men because of this. Don't worry. He knows what he's doing, replied Welk with a grin. Pentel sighed. I hope you're right. He then turned to his platoon and said, All right, gentlemen, today we begin your training with the lions. We will show you how to use them in combat, where to use them, and when. From this point on, these lions are officially part of your squads. They are not to be treated as just some cheap piece of hardware that can be used and abused. Think of them as your best friend, and treat them as such, because at some point they may save your life. Now I want everyone to break up by squads and take some time to get to know your lions. After that we will be going down to the range and training with them for the rest of the afternoon. I want you sharp and able to use your lions to their maximum potential. I also want you to learn to trust them as well. The more you trust them, the better you'll all be able to do your job. Elgar stormed into Black's office holding a folder over his head like a gladiator holding up his sword in victory. Black looked up at him in surprise and then smiled gleefully. Given your current exuberance, I take it that you've succeeded at something especially difficult, he asked. We got the orders. They've agreed to move the labs, exclaimed Elgar. Black perked up in surprise. Excellent. So, how soon will they be moved? The orders are being sent this afternoon. It will take a few days for them to get the necessary resources in place to begin the move, but once those are in place, everything will go quickly. Excellent. Is there anything we can offer them that will speed up the process? Elgar shrugged. I don't know. But I can look. Please do. Anything we can give them, be it trucks, trains, heavy lifting equipment, or whatever, be sure to offer it to them. I will, said Elgar.